Hello everyone. Today we are going to start biology for class 12, and in this biology the chapters which are included in class 12, these are the contents. It starts with unit 6 reproduction, followed by unit 7 genetics and evolution, unit 8 comprises of biology and human welfare, and unit 9 is biotechnology, followed by the last unit, that is ecology. In total in class 12 we have total of 16 chapters. Now the first chapter, which is reproduction, in this it has been further divided into 4 chapters, but the first one which we are going to read is a normal introduction about reproduction in organisms, and this has been fundamentally differentiated into 2 types: asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. But before we move on to what is asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction, we must know that each organism is having a fixed lifespan, be it a banyan tree, or be it a mayfly, or be it an elephant, be it human beings. Every organism on this earth, after taking birth, grows, and after passing the reproductive phase, it ends up its life. That is, senescence happens and the organism dies. So they have a fixed or a definite lifespan. Of course, then a question can arise to your mind that there are some unicellular microscopic organisms which never die. Yeah, that's true. Organisms like bacteria, which multiply after every 20 minutes, we can say that they are immortal. Organisms like virus, viroids, these organisms, we actually cannot call them as living, neither we can call them as non-living. When they enter a host cell, they utilizes the materials of the host cell and they propagate or they multiply. Now, since they can multiply, so that means they can reproduce. So any organism which is capable of multiplying and forming of its own type, we call this process, fundamental process, to be reproduction. Now here in your book there are various organisms given and their lifespan. Some are given and some you have to find out. So I have done it for you. Elephant, it lives for 70 to 90 years. Then rose plants, 7 to 8 years. Be it a hybrid one or be it a wild one, but it's an average life of rose plants, 7 to 8 years. Dogs, 16 to 18 years. Then butterfly is 1 to 2 weeks. Crow for 15 years. Then you have the dogs, which are 16 to 18 years. Then cow, I have forgotten to write here. Cow, it is 20 to 25 years. Parrot is 140 years. Banana, this is a clump. Actually, this tree, it generally propagates by means of vegetative propagation. But yes, the entire clump's lifespan, if you can compare about, this is 25 years. Next is your horse for 30 to 40 years. And highest, if you talk about in terms of the plant kingdom, it is the banyan tree. It is more than 200 years. And if you talk about the animals, the animal having the highest lifespan is tortoise, 100 to 150 years. Now, this is the general lifespan of an organism, and reproduction I have talked about, that it is a biological process in which an organism gives rise to the young ones of its own kind, and having, of course, the 2 forms, that is your asexual reproduction and your sexual reproduction. Now first we will take upon the asexual reproduction. Now this asexual reproduction is a process in which a single parent is required. We don't require the formation of 2 different types of gametes, and it is generally seen in case of the lower group of organisms. It can be even seen in case of the higher group of organisms for the as a means of propagation, which do not bear seeds as in case of plants. But if you talk about the animal kingdom, yes, there are some organisms in the animal kingdom too, like porifera, like the moneurans, like the protistans, which can reproduce by means of asexual reproduction. Now here we have a figure of a yeast cell which develops an outgrowth. Now this outgrowth is called as your bud. This bud, when it matures, at first the nucleus of the parent cell divides, which is called karyokinesis, followed by cytokinesis and then the wall formation. Now this bud will detach from the parent cell and it can grow independently of its own. A similar thing can happen in case of your hydra too. Hydra is a multicellular organism and yeast is a unicellular organism. Now this is a hydra. You can see the outgrowth, the bud. This bud, when detaches, it can also form a fresh hydra. Now besides this, the common form of asexual reproduction which you have been reading from your junior class is binary fission. That means a single organism, the nucleus at first divides, then there will be a constriction, and this constriction will go deeper inside, and then from a single parent cell, two daughter cells will be formed. So since two daughter cells are formed, so it is called binary fission. Some organisms show multiple fission as well. This is very common in case of your bacteria, which show multiple fission. The next form of asexual reproduction is found in case of organisms like fungus. They develop sorts of spore-like structures which is called conidia, and which is formed in conidiophore. And these conidia are so light that they can be easily carried by wind or water, and they will further form a new fungal hyphae, and at first it will be growing vegetatively, and then of course it will enter into the reproductive phase. Now sponges, they form a special structure. Now this special structure is called gemmules. You can see it is inside, and when it matures, you can see a flask-like structure. Now this gemmules will mature, it will rupture, and they will be liberated into the environment, and whenever they will fall into a suitable substratum, they will develop into a new sponge. Now let us come to the organisms like higher plants. Now in case of higher plants, the asexual reproduction is termed as vegetative propagation or vegetative reproduction. The reason is because here the plant utilizes its vegetative parts for growing into a new plant. Now here I have kept some samples of the plant's part which can develop into a new plant. Now this is a potato. You can see very closely that it has some depressed objects. Now these are called the buds, eye buds. As you can see, they look like somewhat having eyebrow-like structures. Now from these depressions, some small bud-like structures they develop. You can see it close, and they will be developing into a new plant. This is called a tuber. Potato grows by means of a tuber. Now this one is ginger. This is rhizome, we call it. It is underground horizontal stem, and here you can see some yellow color structures. Now these are also the buds which will be developing into a ginger plant. And now ginger is a stem. Why? This question can come, why it is not green in color? Yeah, it's not green in color, but if you see closely, you can find that there are some markings on its body rather. So these markings indicate nodes, and from these nodes the small buds arises, and we know that nodes and distance between the two nodes is called internodes, is a characteristic of stem. Moving on to this leaf. This is a Briar phylum leaf, quite known to you. This Briar phylum leaf, you can see how well it is, and it is having some notches. These are the notches. This you can see it. Now these notches are the places which, if you just place it into the soil, this Briar phylum leaf, and regularly water it, so from these notches new baby plantlets will arise. A single leaf can give you multiple number of plants. So here we are using a leaf, so it's a vegetative propagation. It's a asexual reproduction because one parent, there is no genetical combinations. Next, let us take us this grass. Now, vegetative propagation in grass, they are called runners. Why? You can see that they are running, and here you can see that from each nodes they develop the roots. So as they develop roots from the each node, this will be better for you to see. This is a root. This is a root. So from this place, when they are in the soil, they develop aerial branches and they keep on running on the ground, and this is how they propagate by means of the runners. So these are the various ways, and this, of course, I could not get a live sample for you all. This is a aquatic plant. It's called as your water hyacinth, and you can see that the two plants are connected by means of offset, and this offset is actually the part which is responsible for vegetative propagation in case of your water hyacinth. There's an interesting story about this water hyacinth, how it was brought in India. It was brought as an ornamental plant by Queen Victoria because of its beautiful flowers and your beautiful leaves, broad beautiful leaves. But the problem with this plant is that it grows in any stagnant water, propagates very faster, and it can deplete the oxygen level, killing the organisms in the water body. So this is called Terror of Bengal. So that's the story of your water hyacinth. Okay, you can get the writings from that of your book, and please follow NCERT book at first, followed by any other book. So here I have for you one more reference book which is easy to understand by the students, and that is your modern ABC book, biology book, and this is again divided into two parts, part 1 and part 2, and this book is also very good to be followed. Now let us move on to the sexual reproduction. Now sexual reproduction involves two parents, as because there is difference in the characters of the individuals from that of the parents. So it is much more advantageous if you compare in terms of continuing an organism's existence on this earth. So sexual reproduction is far better compared to that of asexual reproduction. But the question arises that when does an organism undergo sexual reproduction? Is it that any time an organism can move on to sexual reproduction? It's not like that. Sometimes it has been observed in the lower group of animals, or even in case of organisms like monarchs and all, when they come into a situation which is disadvantageous for their survival or existence, they move on to sexual reproduction. Now sexual reproduction, before an organism enters into, it has to pass through a vegetative phase or the juvenile phase. Once the growth is completed, then only the organism enters into the sexual mode of reproduction. But then the question arises, in case of plants, there are perennial plants which flowers almost repeatedly for many years. So does it mean that between two flowerings that stage will be called as your juvenile phase? No, it's not like that. Juvenile phase is the initial phase which an organism undergoes before coming to the sexual maturity. And of course, in case of animals, we see that the sexual maturity, once it is achieved, then the organism moves on for reproduction by producing the gametes. If we talk about the higher animals, we can classify those, especially those organisms if we talk about mammals especially, we can classify them into two groups, those who are following the estrous cycle and those organisms which are following the menstrual cycle. The estrous cycle is being followed by organisms which are non-primates, and menstrual cycles are followed by the organisms which have they are not seasonal breeders, rather they are continuous breeders. So we can say that the organisms which show estrous cycles, they are the seasonal breeders, And the organisms which show menstrual cycle, they're continuous breeders. They can breed anytime during their reproductive phase. But once the reproductive phase stops in an organism, senescence comes, and then that indicates actually the completion of the life cycle of an organism. Now, before we move on to the details of the sexual reproduction, one must know that how can we classify this sexual reproduction phases? Well, at first it will be definitely gamete formation. So gametes are meant for what? They are meant for fertilization to form the zygote, and from the zygote finally the embryo and the organism will be developing, isn't it? Now the one which is dealing with that of the formation of the gametes, we call them as your pre-fertilization events, that is formation of the different types of gametes. And after the gametes are formed, then the next phase will be your gamete transfer. And once the gamete has been transferred, then it will result into formation of zygote, and then the zygote will develop into, of course, a new individual by the process of embryogenesis. Okay, and that's all for today. Have a good day.